The Grand Cypress estate stood like a fortress on the cliffs of Malibu, its glass walls reflecting the setting sun as waves crashed against the rocks below. Inside, Alexander Blackwood, billionaire real estate mogul with a portfolio spanning continents, sat alone in his study, surrounded by emptiness that his $40 billion empire couldn't fill. "Mr. Blackwood, she's here again," his head of security announced through the intercom. Alexander's jaw clenched. "Tell her to leave, now." For 3 weeks, Elise Chun had appeared at his gates every day at precisely 5 o'clock. The talented architect who'd won the international competition to design his new headquarters in Singapore now stood outside his home, refusing his rejection. "Sir, she says she won't leave until you hear her out." Alexander slammed his crystal tumbler down, amber liquid sloshing over the rim. "Then have her removed." Elise had been brilliant during their initial meetings, her vision for the Blackwood Tower revolutionary. But then he'd discovered her connection to the Chun family, the same family whose development company had partnered with his father 20 years ago before mysteriously backing out, leaving the Blackwoods near bankruptcy. His father never recovered from the betrayal, drinking himself to death within the year. "Stay away," he had told her when he discovered her identity, canceling the contract despite the millions already invested. "You and your family have taken enough from mine." A crash from the terrace interrupted his thoughts. He turned to find Elise herself standing amid shattered glass from the French doors, rain-soaked and breathless. "Security breach on the west terrace," his bodyguard's voice crackled. "I've got it," Alexander responded, eyes locked with the intruders. 5 minutes, Elise said, her voice steady despite her dripping clothes. "That's all I ask." "You're trespassing. I could have you arrested." "Then do it," she challenged, lifting her chin. "After you hear what I have to say?" Something in her unwavering gaze made him pause. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps the storm raging inside him recognized the one in her eyes. 5 minutes. She reached into her bag, pulling out a weathered leather portfolio. "This belonged to my father. I found it after he died last month." Alexander stiffened, but remained silent. "My father never betrayed yours," she said, opening the portfolio to reveal documents, contracts, letters, photographs. "He was set up by his own brother, my uncle. He was forced to back out of your father's project to protect both families." As Alexander scanned the evidence, his certainty began to crumble. Letters between his father and Chun Sr. revealed a friendship he'd never known existed, and proof of his uncle's manipulation was undeniable. "My father spent 20 years trying to make it right," Elise continued softly. "And on his deathbed, he made me promise to finish what he couldn't." Alexander's world tilted on its axis as decades of resentment collided with this new truth. The wall he'd built around his heart began to crack. "Why do you care so much?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Because some debts can't be paid with money," she answered. "And some promises are worth fighting for, even when a billionaire demands you stay away." 3 weeks later, Alexander stood in the empty skeleton of what would become Blackwood Tower, Singapore's soon-to-be tallest building. Beside him, Elise pointed to holographic renderings hovering in the air, her enthusiasm palpable as she described the sustainable features that would make the structure revolutionary. "The living walls will purify air while reducing energy consumption by 30%, she explained, her fingers dancing through the projection. "It's never been attempted at this scale before." Alexander watched her more than the designs. Since that rainy night at his estate, he'd reluctantly agreed to reinstate her as lead architect. A business decision, he told himself, nothing more. Yet he found himself drawn to her unwavering passion, so different from the calculated ambition he encountered in his world. "Your vision is ambitious," he acknowledged, "but the board is concerned about the timeline." "Some things can't be rushed," she countered, "like trust." The weight of her words hung between them. Trust was precisely what he couldn't give not to a Chun, regardless of what her father's documents revealed. 20 years of hatred couldn't be undone in 3 weeks. Later that evening, they found themselves alone in his penthouse office overlooking the Singapore skyline, reviewing changes to the structural plans. The proximity was unsettling. Every time she leaned close to mark something on the blueprints, her scent jasmine and something uniquely her clouded his judgment. "You still don't trust me," she stated, not a question but a fact. "I'm working with you, aren't I?" "Working with me, yes. But always watching, always waiting for betrayal." She set down her pen. "Our fathers were friends once. They trusted each other. And look how that ended." "In tragedy orchestrated by others," she reminded him, "we have a chance to write a different ending." The tension between them was interrupted by his phone. Frowning at the screen, Alexander took the call, his expression darkening with each passing second. "What is it?" Delise asked when he hung up. "The environmental approval for the tower's foundation has been denied. Someone submitted evidence claiming our plans will damage the underground water system. That's impossible. I personally oversaw those assessments. Well, someone wants this project dead." He paced, calculating losses. "Construction halts tomorrow. We're looking at months of delays, millions in penalties." Elise grabbed her tablet, fingers flying across the surface. The geological surveys were tampered with. "Look, these aren't our original readings." Alexander stared at the doctored reports, fury building. "Who would have access to?" "My uncle sits on the environmental board," she said quietly. "He still controls 30% of Chun developments. If Blackwood Tower succeeds with my design, he loses control of the narrative," Alexander finished, "and the revenge he's built his reputation on." Their eyes met in mutual understanding. They weren't just building a tower. They were dismantling a decades-old lie that had destroyed both their families. "I need to know," Alexander said, his voice low. "Are you with me in this? Completely?" Instead of answering, Elise reached for his hand, the first time they'd touched. Her fingers were warm against his cold ones, the contact sending an electric current up his arm. "Some debts," she repeated her words from that first night, "can't be paid with money." The Hong Kong business elite gathered at the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, diamonds glittering under crystal chandeliers, as Alexander navigated the crowd with practiced ease. Tonight was crucial. He needed the Asian Development Consortium support to overcome the regulatory hurdles facing Blackwood Tower. "Alexander Blackwood," purred Victoria Zhao, the consortium's chairwoman, "finally emerging from your ivory. Tower to mingle with us mortals?" "Only for the exceptional company," he replied smoothly, kissing her hand. Her eyes shifted beyond his shoulder. "And your exceptional companion?" Alexander turned to find Elise entering the ballroom, transformed. From the determined architect in construction boots to an ethereal vision in emerald silk. The dress clung to curves he'd pretended not to notice during their long working sessions, her hair cascading in waves rather than the practical bun she favored on sight. "My architect," he said, the possessive pronoun slipping out unbidden. "Interesting." Victoria smiled knowingly. "I've heard rumors about your collaboration." Alexander stiffened. "Ms. Chun's designs are revolutionary." "I wasn't referring to her designs, darling." Before he could respond, Chun Wei Elise's uncle and the man responsible for the 20-year vendetta between their families approached. With a champagne flute in hand. "Blackwood," he acknowledged coldly. "Bold move bringing my niece as your date." "Business associate," Alexander corrected, though the distinction felt hollow as Elise reached them, her perfume making his heart race. "Uncle," she greeted with perfect composure. "Surprising to see you here." "Family should stay close," Wei smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Speaking of family, I've been meaning to discuss your father's shares in Chun Developments. As his sole heir, you're entitled to 15% ownership. Alexander watched the exchange carefully, sensing the trap. I'm aware, Elise replied. Combined with your mother's shares, you control 26%, Wei continued. 1% shy of blocking my decisions. His gaze flickered to Alexander. Unless, of course, you found a partner with resources to acquire additional shares. The implication was clear. Wei believed they were plotting against him. My focus is architecture, uncle, not corporate takeovers. Wei's smile tightened. Then you won't mind signing over your voting rights. Temporarily, of course. We should discuss this privately, Elise suggested. Why? Afraid your lover might see your true colors? Wei's voice rose slightly. The Chun blood runs in your veins, niece. We take what we want. Alexander stepped forward. That's enough, is it? Wei turned to the gathering crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, a Blackwood and a Chun working together. History does repeat itself, doesn't it? Last time, it ended with Richard Blackwood drinking himself to death after my brother gutted his company. The ballroom fell silent. Alexander's hands curled into fists. You're drunk, uncle, Elise said quietly, and lying. Am I? Wei laughed bitterly. Ask your boyfriend what he really thinks of you. Ask if he told you about buying controlling interest in your mother's company last week. The same company keeping her comfortable in that Swiss clinic. Elise's eyes snapped to Alexander's, the betrayal evident. You did what? He reached for her arm. Elise, I can explain. Don't touch me, she whispered, pulling away. All this time. You were just like him, using me to get to my family. Before he could respond, she turned and fled through the crowd, leaving Alexander standing alone as Wei raised his glass in mocking salute. Like father, like son, Wei said. Some wars never end, Blackwood. They just find new battlefields. Rain lashed against the windows of Alexander's Singapore penthouse as he stared at the city lights blurring through water-streaked glass. 3 days since the Hong Kong disaster. 3 days of Elise ignoring his calls. Her absence from the project site, leaving a void no amount of work could fill. His phone buzzed with a message from his investigator. Found something. Coming up. Minutes later, Lucas entered, shaking rainwater from his coat. You were right about Chun Wei. He's been moving money offshore massive amounts. I traced transfers to shell companies that own significant portions of the land surrounding your tower site. He's planning something. Worse, he's nearly bankrupt. Lucas laid out documents on the table. He's leveraged everything on a competing development that breaks ground next month. If your tower succeeds first, he loses everything, Alexander finished. And he's using Elise's mother as leverage. About that, Lucas hesitated. Mrs. Chun's medical records. The Swiss clinic reported she's been declining rapidly. Experimental treatments are her only hope, but they're expensive. Alexander's chest tightened. He hadn't known about her condition when he acquired controlling interest in her company, a move intended to protect it from Wei's mismanagement, not to pressure Elise. Thunder crashed outside as a new realization dawned. Wei knew. I'd discover his financial troubles. The scene at the gala wasn't about stopping our collaboration. It was about destroying her trust in me. A soft knock interrupted them. Alexander opened the door to find Elise standing in the hallway, soaked from the rain, her eyes red-rimmed. You're buying out my family, she said without preamble. Not in the way you think. He stepped aside, inviting her in. We need to talk. Lucas discreetly gathered the documents and excused himself as Elise entered, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. My mother called, she said, voice barely audible over the rain. The clinic informed her that her treatments would continue regardless of financial circumstances. They said an anonymous benefactor had covered everything indefinitely. She looked up at him. Was that you? Would it matter if it was? He countered. It would matter why. Alexander turned away, unable to bear the vulnerability in her eyes. Your uncle is destroying everything your father built. The company, the legacy, he's burning it all to fuel his vendetta. Against your family, she said softly. A vendetta that became yours. Yes, he admitted, until you showed me the truth. She stepped closer. Did you buy my mother's company to control me? I bought it to save it, he said, finally facing her. Before I knew about her condition. Before I knew ... He stopped, the words catching in his throat. Before you knew what? The penthouse lights flickered as lightning illuminated the room, casting Elise's face in stark relief, beautiful, fierce, wounded. Before I knew that I was falling in love with you, Alexander confessed, the truth he'd been denying for weeks finally spoken aloud. That I've been fighting it every day since you broke into my house and shattered everything I thought I knew. Elise's breath caught. She moved toward him, close enough that he could see droplets of rain still clinging to her eyelashes. I came here tonight to tell you I'm leaving the project, she whispered. That I can't keep living in this shadow between our families. Alexander felt something breaking inside him. And now? Instead of answering, she reached up, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with a tenderness that undid him. 20 years of hatred and mistrust dissolved in that touch, leaving only the raw, frightening truth between them. Now, she said, I need to know if there's enough left to rebuild. 1 year later, Singapore's skyline had forever changed. Blackwood Tower stood complete, a gleaming testament to innovation, its living walls cascading with vibrant greenery from base to spire. Tonight, the city's elite gathered for its grand opening, champagne flowing as spotlights illuminated the architectural marvel. Alexander stood alone on the observation deck, 90 stories above the city. Below, guests marveled at Elise's design, her vision realized in steel, glass, and living gardens that seemed to breathe with the building itself. The elevator doors opened behind him. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. The great Alexander Blackwood hiding at his own party? Elise teased, joining him at the glass wall. The diamond ring on her left hand caught the light as she placed her palm against his. Observing. He corrected, squeezing her fingers. Your creation is the star tonight. Our creation, she amended. I designed it, but you fought for it. They stood in comfortable silence, watching boats glide across the harbor below. The past year had been a battleground, legal challenges from Shen Wei, construction setbacks, media scrutiny of their relationship, but they'd faced it together, rebuilding trust with the same meticulous care they'd given the tower. Have you seen the news? Elise asked quietly. Alexander nodded. That morning, Xun Wei had been indicted for financial fraud, his empire crumbling under investigation. Are you okay? He made his choices, she said, sadness in her voice. Just as we made ours. The elevator opened again, and Elise's mother appeared in her wheelchair, accompanied by a nurse. Her condition had stabilized with the experimental treatments, not a cure, but precious time gained. Mother, Elise greeted, embracing her, you should be resting. Then miss seeing my daughter's triumph? Mrs. Chun smiled weakly. I've waited too long for this. She turned to Alexander, reaching for his hand. My husband would have been proud to see a Blackwood and a Chun create something beautiful together. The words struck Alexander deeply. He thought of his own father, wondering if somewhere Richard Blackwood was finally at peace. I have something to show you both, he said, leading them to a concealed panel in the wall. With a touch, it slid, open to reveal a small room he'd kept secret, even from Elise. Inside stood two bronze statues, Richard Blackwood and Henry Chun, their hands clasped in partnership, faces bearing the determined expressions of men with vision. Elise gasped, tears filling her eyes as she recognized her father's likeness. "The founder's room," Alexander explained. "Every person who works in this building will know the truth, that this tower stands on a foundation of friendship, not rivalry." Mrs. Chun moved forward in her wheelchair, touching the statue of her husband with trembling fingers. "Henry always said that what was broken could be rebuilt stronger," she whispered. Alexander slipped his arm around Elise's waist, drawing her close. He was right. As Mrs. Chun's nurse quietly escorted her back to the elevator, Elise turned in Alexander's arms, her eyes searching his. "You know what today is?" she asked. He nodded. "1 year since you broke into my house and changed everything." "1 year since you demanded I stay away," she corrected with a smile. "Good thing I didn't listen." Alexander cupped her face, still amazed that the wall around his heart had not just cracked, but fallen completely. "I'm glad you're stubborn," he murmured, "and that you saw what I couldn't." Below them, Singapore sparkled. Above them, stars emerged in the night sky. And between them, a love built from the ruins of a feud, stronger for having weathered the storm. "They'll be waiting for us downstairs," Elise reminded him. "The speeches, the ribbon cutting." "Let them wait," Alexander said, drawing her closer. "Some moments are worth savoring." As their lips met, high above the city they'd changed together. Both knew that the true monument to their families wasn't the tower beneath their feet, but the future they'd built from a past too long defined by the words, "Stay away."